I was in a taxi when suddenly a series of soft gasps came from my phone. The driver glanced at the rearview mirror and grinned. "Bro, where did you find this kind of video?" he said. This soft voice is really getting to me. I'm almost feeling it myself. "Bro, share the link." Hearing this, I looked up, expression cold, and replied, "This is the security footage from my living room." Chapter 1. Upon hearing this, the driver froze, his grin turning stiff. He quickly turned his head and didn't dare to speak another word. I let out a cold laugh, withdrew my gaze, and returned to watching the security footage on my phone. I thought to myself, if it weren't for wanting to surprise Willow, I wouldn't have suddenly decided to cut my business trip short. I wouldn't have checked the home security to see if Willow was home, and I wouldn't have discovered what she was up to with that man. In the footage, Willow smiled, playing along with him, her face full of satisfaction. The man was putting in extra effort, looking like he almost wanted to lift and start exercising. A moment later, the driver cleared his throat twice and awkwardly said, "Sir, we've arrived at your destination." His inquisitive gaze lingered, but I couldn't care less. I stepped out of the car, barely noticing the steps I took, my body moving like a zombie. Before I knew it, I found myself standing in front of the door. I raised my hand to knock, but halfway through, I lowered it again. How ridiculous. Now I have to knock to get into my own home. I pulled out my phone and called the chairman of the company. "I've made up my mind. I'm willing to take the position of general manager at the branch overseas." On the other end, I heard a hearty laugh. "Ha ha ha. I'm glad you figured it out, but this will make things tougher for your fiancé. I heard you two are getting married soon." I chuckled lightly, exchanged a few pleasantries, and hung up. Marriage, to hell with that. But just as I hung up, the door opened from the inside. Willow looked surprised to see me and instinctively stepped in front of Makoto. "George, what are you doing back?" she asked, looking into Willow's surprised face. I answered indifferently. The business trip went smoothly. I finished the task ahead of schedule, so I came back. Although I was speaking to Willow, my gaze didn't leave Makoto's face for a second. Makoto grew uneasy under my stare, instinctively adjusting his collar to hide the bright red marks on his neck. Before I could ask anything, Willow, with a smile, pushed Makoto in front of me and introduced him. "Let me introduce you. This is Makoto, my distant cousin. This is his first time in a city, and he didn't have a place to stay, so I took the liberty of having him stay with us." As soon as she finished, Makoto reached out his hand to me. "Hello. Willow often mentions you. You must be George, right? Sorry for the trouble I've caused you lately." I glanced at his outstretched hand, then casually slapped it away with the back of my hand. Willow frowned in displeasure. "George, what are you doing? Makoto's my cousin. You should be polite to him." In my mind, I sneered. Cousin. So this is what happens when people start having an affair. But what I couldn't understand was, Willow and I had been together for over a year. We had just been apart for a few days. So how had she suddenly developed feelings for this man without any hesitation? What had happened during the half-month I was away? I wanted to know why, so I didn't expose them. Makoto sensed my hostility and awkwardly withdrew his hand. He pulled Willow towards the stairs, heading downstairs. "First time meeting you. Let me treat you to a meal as a thank you for taking care of my cousin," he said. I stood there, watching their backs as they walked side by side, my emotions a mix of confusion and resentment. If it were before, Willow would have given me a big hug when I came home. Then we'd go out for dinner, shopping, or watch a movie together. But now, Willow's entire focus was on Makoto. She didn't even glance at me. I walked in silence, heavy-hearted, following them downstairs. At the restaurant downstairs, Makoto looked at Willow with a doting smile. "Willow, should we stick with the usual?" Willow nodded with a smile, completely ignoring me as she stood next to them. They looked like a couple who had known each other for years, understanding each other's habits and preferences. Makoto glanced at me with a smug look and said, "The dishes I've ordered are all Willow's favorites. I hope you don't mind." I forced a smile and replied casually, "Of course not." Every time I ate with Willow, I also made sure to order what she liked. It wasn't a big deal for me. However, Makoto had ordered only beef. Chapter 2. Upon hearing this, Makoto nodded. He sat down next to Willow, leaving the seat across from me. When the waiter brought the dishes, he looked at them and complimented, "This gentleman and lady look really perfect together. You must be a couple, right?" Makoto was pleased to hear this and waved his hand, pulling out several bills and handing them to the waiter. "Thanks for your service. This is a tip for you." The waiter's eyes widened in surprise, eagerly accepting the tip with both hands, his face almost splitting with a grin. He said a few words of good luck before finally retreating. Willow, caught off guard, lowered her head shyly but didn't deny it. I sat across from her, staring hard, as if trying to bore a hole in her face. I asked, "What? Are you mute? Can't you even argue back?" Hearing my questioning tone, Willow raised her head in displeasure, snorted, and said, "Look at you, acting all petty. Do I need to explain myself every time someone misunderstands me? Seeing that Willow was angry, Makoto immediately began patting her back reassuringly, saying softly, "Don't get upset, it's not worth it. Let's not be angry, okay?" When the food arrived, Makoto was the first to pick up some beef with his chopsticks and lovingly said to Willow, "Willow, eat more, look at you, you're getting thinner." Then, Makoto placed another piece of beef into my bowl. He squinted slightly and said indifferently, "You should eat more too, just to thank you for taking care of Willow." In just half a month, they had already become so familiar with each other. Every gesture of Makoto made me feel like I was the guest in my own home. Willow said, "George, this beef is really delicious. You should try it." Her eyes were sparkling as she urged me to eat, but I set my chopsticks down, my mind flashing through memories of the years we had shared. I first met Willow in the hospital. At that time, I was rushed there for an allergic reaction to beef. When I opened my eyes, I saw Willow in the bed next to mine. Her face was pale, her head wrapped in bandages, but her beauty still shone through. I fell in love with her at first sight, and from then on, I did everything I could to create opportunities to be close to her. The nurses told me Willow had been in a car accident and had lost all her memories. She didn't know who she was, didn't know what she did. Everything was like a blank slate. When I learned this, I immediately sought the police's help to find her name and identity. She was an orphan, raised in an orphanage, and after turning 18, she had come out, planning to find her first job when this misfortune happened. I was moved by her story and offered her a position as my secretary. Since she had no place to stay, I gave her a room in my home. Over time, and under my persistent pursuit, Willow's heart gradually opened, and we officially became a couple. 5 years of love, and I treated her better and better, almost fulfilling her every wish. Willow liked to travel, so I would always make time to accompany her. She liked baking, so I spent money on classes for her and bought her all the necessary tools. She liked wearing dresses, so I cleared out a room in the house for her clothes. Even when I was busy with work, I always set aside one day a week to spend time with Willow, enjoying a little romance together. Our relationship was growing stronger, and we were even talking about marriage. Although Willow had already agreed to marry me, I still wanted to propose to her in a romantic way. So, I ended my business trip early, hoping to surprise her. But now, Makoto's appearance had completely shattered everything. While he was around, Willow didn't even spare me a glance. Willow noticed I hadn't touched my food, and frowned, urging, "What are you waiting for? Eat." Her voice pulled me out of my memories, and I glanced at the beef in my bowl, feeling a surge of disgust. "I'm allergic to beef," I replied. Willow, upon hearing this, covered her mouth and started laughing. She pointed at me, mocking, "You're allergic to beef? We've been dating for 5 years, and I didn't know that." Willow's laughter made her tremble with amusement, and she naturally leaned into Makoto's embrace. In my heart, I sneered. So she still remembers she's my girlfriend. I had almost wondered if Willow had been replaced or if she had lost her memory again. But no, she hadn't. And she didn't even intend to confess anything about her relationship with Makoto. After finishing dinner, Willow kindly picked up a napkin and started wiping Makoto's mouth. I sat there, my hands clenched tightly under the table. On the way back, Willow skipped along, holding Makoto's hand, smiling happily. Halfway there, she turned around and said to me, "George, let's set our wedding date for next Monday. If we wait another day, Makoto will have to leave." Chapter 3. Her tone wasn't one of discussion, but of announcement. I nodded indifferently and replied, "Fine." For me, the timing of the wedding didn't matter, because I no longer wanted to marry her. I had no interest in marrying a woman who had betrayed me. When I returned home, I walked to my bedroom door, only to find that everything on the shelf was gone. I turned around and questioned, "Who moved my things in my room?" Makoto walked up slowly, his steps calm, and said with a harsh tone, "Why are you being so aggressive? What if you scare Willow?" I just thought those decorations were ugly, so I packed them up and threw them away. They weren't valuable anyway. Was it really necessary to get this angry? Plus, you're a grown man, and you've got embroidery fans in your room. Aren't you afraid of people making fun of you? Makoto looked at me, his eyes full of disdain and a hint of sarcasm. Seeing that he admitted it, my anger flared up. Before he could react, I swung my arm and, with a loud thud, landed a punch squarely on his face. Willow, who was passing by, saw this and rushed over to support Makoto. Her face full of concern, she asked, "Makoto, are you okay? Does it hurt?" The next moment, she turned and yelled at me, "George, what's wrong with you? Is it really necessary to hit him just because he moved a few things?" I had mentally prepared myself for Willow to defend him, but when I saw her so firmly stand by Makoto's side, the anger inside me turned to pure resentment. I pointed at Makoto and yelled, "Those things are mementos from my parents. How dare you throw them away?" While Willow was still trying to comfort Makoto, she suddenly froze at my words. Her eyes flashed with guilt, and she avoided meeting my gaze. But I wasn't going to let her off the hook. I stared directly at her and said, "You know how much those things mean to me. Who the hell does your so-called cousin think he is? Touching my stuff? It's light of me to just hit him." My voice grew louder with each word, and Willow trembled slightly at my outburst. Willow remembered that I had once told her the embroidery fans in my room were the last creations of my late mother. My mother had been a master of intangible cultural heritage, and during a trip to study embroidery techniques, she tragically died in a landslide, buried forever under the mountain. Unable to bear the loss of his beloved, my father sank into despair, and eventually, he passed away as well. In just 1 month, I lost both of my parents, and I couldn't even see them one last time. At that time, I had been on a business trip. My father, afraid that I would worry, never told me about my mother's accident. When he passed away, it was the hospital that called me. That period of time had been a deep wound in my heart, and I remained in grief for a long time. Only Willow had helped me pull myself together bit by bit. A sense of guilt rose in Willow's heart. She wanted to apologize on Makoto's behalf. Just as she was about to speak, Makoto preemptively said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know the significance of those things. I can always buy a few identical fans and replace them." Hearing this, I shoved Willow aside and landed another punch, this time on his nose. Through gritted teeth, I said, "How about I remove your arm and give you a prosthetic instead?" Seeing me hit Makoto again, any remaining guilt Willow might have felt disappeared entirely, replaced by annoyance. She frowned and said in a sharp tone, "All right, it's just some objects. They've already been thrown away. What more do you want? Besides, he's apologized to you, and you're still going at him like this. Isn't that a bit too much?" Looking at how Willow was siding with Makoto, I couldn't help but feel bitterly amused. The person who once gently helped me through my darkest times was now standing with someone else, criticizing me together. I didn't say anything else and turned to leave. Watching my retreating figure, Makoto furrowed his brow, tugged at Willow's sleeve, and with a pitiful tone, asked, "Why did he leave? Doesn't he want me to stay here?" Willow gently patted his back and replied softly, "It's fine. He's probably just jealous. Leave him for a day or two, and he'll come around." Chapter 4. Anyway, it wasn't the first time she'd done something like this. I spoiled her too much. Every time she frowned, I would want to give her the world, to make her happy. I, a general manager of a listed company, put on a frog costume in the scorching heat of over 40 degrees Celsius for an entire hour, just to surprise her. When we had disagreements, Willow never needed to back down. All I had to do was stay calm for 2 days, and then I would be back, grinning and trying to make her happy again, buying her various bags and jewelry. But this time, Willow miscalculated. Perhaps because I had pampered her too much, she mistakenly thought that no matter what wrong she did, I would always forgive her. After I left, I went straight to the office. The company in China was in its off-season, so there weren't many documents to handle. By the time it was quitting time, Kelly was surprised to see I was still in the office. Kelly opened the door and asked curiously, "Mr. Wong, you usually rush home to be with your girlfriend by this time, don't you? Why haven't you left today?" I looked up from a pile of documents while sitting in my swivel chair. I gave a casual smile and replied, "I still have some work to finish. You can go ahead." Kelly, feeling awkward, left, wondering if there was a fight between us. After everyone left, I finally let out a sigh of relief. I pushed all the documents aside and rested my head on the desk, falling asleep. For several days in a row, I didn't go home. This made Willow anxious. She feared that this time, I was genuinely angry, so she called me first, hoping to smooth things over. She said, "George, we're getting married next Monday, just 5 days away. How about we go wedding dress shopping tomorrow?" At the sound of her words, my eyes suddenly lit up. Since Willow had put such a huge green hat on me, I needed to prepare a special gift for her, making her the most eye-catching bride. I agreed immediately, already planning my next step in my revenge scheme. Willow, hearing my agreement, smiled brightly. When Makoto walked over and saw Willow smiling so happily, he asked curiously, "What's going on? What's making my Willow so happy?" He casually wrapped his arm around her waist. Willow smiled proudly and raised an eyebrow, saying, "I thought he would be so stubborn and sulk for a long time. I didn't expect that as soon as I asked him to go wedding dress shopping, he agreed without hesitation. I knew it. He's totally in love with me." Hearing this, Makoto affectionately patted her head and said, "My Willow is so beautiful. It's only natural that men fall for her." The next day, I took an early shift and went to the wedding dress store Willow had mentioned. When I arrived at the door, I saw Makoto in a suit, helping Willow zip up her wedding dress. Willow had her head tilted, her long, wavy hair flowing down her smooth, white shoulders. They looked like a couple of models from a wedding poster, radiating love. The photographer couldn't resist snapping a picture of the scene. He handed the photo to Makoto and Willow, praising them with a smile. "You two are the most perfect couple I've seen in days. A perfect match. Handsome and beautiful." I couldn't resist capturing this moment. "Consider it a wedding gift from me." Willow took the photo first, looked at it, and then covered her mouth, giggling. Makoto leaned in to take a look, his face also breaking into a contented smile. I suddenly spoke up. "How come I didn't know? So you two are really a couple?" I stuffed my hands in my pockets, my voice laced with irritation. Hearing this, Willow looked up, displeased. She asked, "Why are you being so jealous for no reason? You're late, and now you're making sarcastic comments." The staff, seeing the scene, wisely exited and closed the door behind them. They'd seen all sorts of strange things in their line of work and were long used to such drama. Makoto wrapped his arm around Willow's waist and gave me a challenging look. He said, "With your behavior, I don't feel comfortable leaving Willow with you." I let out a cold laugh and responded indifferently. "Is that so? If you're so worried, why don't you two just get married?" The agreed time was 6 p.m. I had arrived at 5:30, but still ended up being blamed for being late. I turned to leave, but just as I was about to go, "Wait." Willow, hearing I was about to call off the wedding, rushed over, lifting her wedding dress as she hurried to my side. She said, "Don't be so petty, okay? My cousin is just worried about my future happiness, so he's being difficult. You didn't even try to make a good impression, and now you're giving us the cold shoulder. Do you think that's right?" I narrowed my eyes. The image of the surveillance footage from that day flashed in my mind, the picture quality so clear that I could see every drop of sweat on Willow's face. Her words were truly absurd. I stared at Willow for a long time before finally asking, "Do you love me?" She replied, "Of course, I do." Without hesitation, Willow immediately gave the answer that was in her heart. Chapter 5. But whether it's a betrayal of the spirit or a betrayal of the body, both are unforgivable in my eyes. If her heart is still with me but her body has already betrayed me, it will only make me feel even more disgusted. She asked, "George, how can you doubt me after 5 years of our relationship?" Willow's eyes were full of tears, as if she were about to break down at any moment. She grabbed my arm, looking pitiful, begging me not to leave. She said, "We promised to choose the wedding dress together, and I want to wear the one you personally pick out to marry you." At her words, I suddenly smiled, curling the corners of my mouth. Since she was so eager to marry me, I would grant her wish, give Willow a wedding she would never forget. With this thought in mind, I looked around and quickly spotted their store's most expensive gown. I said, "I'll take this one. Only the most expensive wedding dress can match you." I called over a staff member and quickly paid. Soon, the staff delivered the dress into Willow's hands. She happily went to the fitting room to try it on. At that moment, Makoto slowly walked up to me, arms crossed, sneering as he said, "Can't you tell? The person Willow loves is me. If you're smart, you'll step aside immediately." I couldn't help but laugh at his words. I replied, "So what? The person she's marrying is me." Makoto's face instantly darkened. He gritted his teeth and said, "Don't get too happy too soon. You're not married yet. Willow will be mine sooner or later." Hearing that, I remained indifferent, let out a light laugh, and turned to leave. I didn't care who Willow would marry in the end. After leaving the wedding dress shop, I drove back to the company. I was about to start a new position at the overseas office in 2 days, so there was a lot of work to hand over. The fitting room curtain was pulled open, and Willow stepped out with a smile. She eagerly asked, "George, do I look good in this wedding dress?" But before she finished her sentence, the smile on Willow's face froze. She furrowed her brows and asked, "Where's George?" Makoto smiled softly and saidly, "He left right after you went in." He looked at Willow with a playful expression and whispered, "All along, you were so devoted to him, swearing that he would forgive you unconditionally no matter what. But from what I see, he doesn't have you in his heart. If he did, why would he leave a beautiful bride and go off to play dress up with his so-called cousin? I believe no man would tolerate that. So, what do you say? How about you marry me in 2 days?" The moment he finished speaking, Willow slapped him across the face. She shouted, "Makoto, I warn you, stop it. Whatever happened before, at least now, I can say for sure that the person I love is George." With that, Willow turned and went back into the fitting room to change out of the dress. Makoto, completely stunned by the unexpected slap, stood there dazed. Then, as if struck by a sudden thought, a smile crept onto his lips. He silently vowed in his mind, "One day, you will be mine." The next day, I surprisingly went home to grab my ID and household registration book. When Willow saw me come back, her face was full of concern. She said, "George, it's already almost noon. What would you like to eat? I'll make it for you right away." Sensing my deliberate distance, she began to panic and even started thinking of ways to please me. I shook my head and coldly replied, I have work to do at the company. I'll eat out. Hearing this, Willow's face fell with disappointment. At the same time, Makoto, who had been leaning against the wall, saw everything unfold. He thought to himself, this is bad. After I finally managed to smooth things over with Willow, George comes back and ruins everything. An hour later, while I was at the company dealing with documents, my phone suddenly buzzed several times. It was a message from Makoto. He asked, do you prefer hyaluronic acid or the regular kind? Attached were pictures of several big-name condoms. A minute later, Makoto retracted the message and added, oops, sent that to the wrong person. Your and Willow's profile pictures are too similar. Although Willow and I did have matching couple profile pictures, they didn't look that much alike to cause confusion. Clearly, Makoto had intentionally sent that message to me. Was he trying to make a move on Willow tomorrow? I didn't call out his poor acting, and simply replied with a casual "oh." Seeing that, Makoto instantly lost his composure. He asked, are you free tonight? I have something I want to talk to you about. Chapter 6. At 7 p.m. In the cafe downstairs from my company, the coffee in front of Makoto hadn't been touched, and he stared at me intently as he said, I'll confess, I'm not Willow's cousin. I took a sip of my coffee and nodded indifferently. I replied, Seeing my reaction, a hint of confusion appeared on Makoto's face. He asked, you're so calm. Could it be that you already knew? I didn't respond, but from the look on his face, Makoto seemed to have figured out something. He said, since that's the case, I'll be straightforward. Makoto stopped holding back and told me everything. He and Willow grew up in the same orphanage, and before Willow lost her memory, they had already fallen in love. On the day they turned adults, they planned to go out, find work, rent a place, and begin their life together. Once they reached the legal age, they would get married. But after Willow went for a job interview, he never heard from her again. At that time, they had just entered society, and there were no cell phones. So aside from waiting for Willow to return in the rented apartment, he had no other way to reach her. He waited for over half a month, but in the end, he had to accept that Willow had left. He guessed that Willow must have found him too poor and had rejected him. It took him a long time to move on, and only recently did he receive some news about Willow. That's when he realized that she hadn't left him. She had lost her memory. So, I was the newcomer. I was the one who should step aside. I was a bit surprised and said, so you two already knew each other. That explained why their relationship developed so quickly. I had always been curious about it, but now that I had the answer right in front of me, I could hardly believe it. After so many years of love, so much effort, I was the third party. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about Makoto's story seemed off. When Willow disappeared, why didn't he call the police, but instead waited in the apartment like an idiot? But these things didn't matter anymore. I asked, so why are you telling me all of this now? I asked directly. I wasn't interested in playing games or wasting time. Makoto, seeing an opportunity, couldn't wait to say, if I can prove that Willow still loves me, will you step aside? His eyes were full of certainty, as if he was sure Willow still loved him and that I would just give in. I glanced at him nonchalantly and nodded lightly. Sure. Seeing that I agreed, Makoto quickly pulled out his phone and dialed Willow's number. He spoke to her in front of me. Willow, tomorrow you're going to marry George. I have one last wish. Could you fulfill it? Willow was silent for a moment before asking, what's your last wish? Makoto smiled and softly said, I want to hear you say that you love me again. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Willow's voice came through. I love you. Satisfied with the answer, Makoto blew a kiss to the phone and hung up with a smile. He looked at me triumphantly. He said, how's that? Tomorrow, you should know what to do, right? After saying that, he didn't wait for my response and stood up to leave. I slowly took another sip of the coffee on the table. It had no sugar or milk, slightly bitter with a lingering aftertaste. For Willow, I had already let go. She was like coffee, bitter enough to make me frown. But after swallowing, a bit of sweetness lingered. I craved that tiny bit of sweetness, but when I tried to taste it again, it was all bitterness. It wasn't until today that I truly let myself go. When I saw the surveillance footage, I had hated Willow and Makoto, hated myself for misjudging people, hated that I was too busy with work and gave Makoto the chance, and hated myself for being so indulgent with Willow, letting her believe that no matter what she did, I would always love her. When I got home, Makoto's room was closed tight, and he must have already been asleep. At that moment, Willow came out of her room. She was holding a well-tailored suit and held it up in front of me, saying, I know you're busy with work, so I had this suit custom made for you. Tomorrow, when you wear it, you'll be the handsomest groom. I took the suit with a neutral expression and said thank you. Willow, showing a rare wife-like side, only did these things when she sensed my coldness and detachment, when she thought I might give up on this relationship. George Wong. Willow called my full name. She hesitated for a moment and then asked, "You'll come to the wedding tomorrow, won't you?" They say a woman's intuition is the most accurate. She must have felt that my feelings for her had faded. In the past, no matter how much she misbehaved, I would indulgently look at her and say, "I really can't do anything about you." But now, even though she had carefully arranged this suit for me, I only glanced at it. As I reached the door, I heard Willow's voice. I didn't turn around but replied in a low voice, With that, I went back to my room and closed the door. Chapter 7. I looked at the custom-made suit in my hands. Perfectly tailored. I tried it on, and it fit well. It's surprising that Willow remembered my measurements so precisely. Perhaps, in her heart, she's been struggling as well. On one side, there's her boyfriend from before the memory loss, and on the other, there's her boyfriend after it. If she had to choose between the two, it must have been quite difficult for her. Since that's the case, I'll be the bigger person and make the choice for her. I wrote a farewell letter and tucked it under the sheets. That night, the hours felt particularly long. I gazed out at the city lights, not able to sleep. Time quietly slipped away between my fingers. I didn't notice when the dark night outside faded away, replaced by the faint light of dawn. Before I knew it, the wedding had begun smoothly. When Willow saw me in the custom suit, she finally smiled. She looked particularly beautiful today. The waistline of the wedding dress had been altered to perfectly highlight her stunning figure. Guests all around praised her. "This is the most beautiful bride I've ever seen. If I'm not mistaken, this wedding dress is a piece by Master Maori, worth 10 million. 10 million for a wedding dress. This wedding is extravagant. The bride is so lucky." Willow, hearing all the compliments, lowered her head shyly. At the same time, the MC raised the microphone and loudly announced, "Next, let's welcome the groom." The whole hall erupted in warm applause. Some of them, just friends of the family, had never seen me before, so they were eagerly awaiting the appearance of this groom worth millions. At that moment, I had already changed out of my custom suit. I knocked on the door of the groomsmen's lounge and called Makoto out. When Makoto saw that I had changed out of the suit, he raised an eyebrow and asked, "Have you figured it out?" I gave a cold laugh and threw the suit at him. I said, "Wish you both a lifetime of happiness." With that, I turned and left. The car that the company had arranged to take me to the airport was already waiting at the hotel entrance. Without any hesitation, I opened the car door and got in. The midday sun streamed through the car window, bathing my face in warmth, like a new beginning. In the hotel lobby, the guests' applause continued for half a minute, but the groom's figure was still nowhere to be seen. The MC seemed a little awkward. He cleared his throat and explained, "Perhaps the groom is a little nervous and didn't hear our call." The next second, he raised the microphone to his mouth and increased his volume. "Let's give an even more enthusiastic round of applause to welcome the groom." As soon as he finished speaking, the applause grew louder. On stage, Willow bit her lip, her hands tightly clutching the hem of her dress. She had an unsettling feeling in her heart. Someone shouted, "The groom's coming. He's coming." With the exclamation, Makoto slowly walked up from the back of the hall. The guests' applause grew even more enthusiastic. "They're a perfect match. A handsome couple. Such a beautiful bride deserves such a handsome groom." At this moment, Willow couldn't hear the applause from the guests. She looked at Makoto beside her, confusion written all over her face. She asked, "Why is it you? Where's George?" She didn't lower her voice on purpose, and everyone sitting in the front row, including the MC, could hear her clearly. The experienced MC caught the hint in her words. He held the microphone but didn't rush to continue with the ceremony. Makoto, under questioning, lowered his voice and quietly said, "I told him everything." George said, "He blesses us. He's already gone." When Willow heard this, her pupils dilated in shock. She shook her head in disbelief and screamed, "No, that's impossible." With that, she lifted her wedding dress and ran out of the hotel. As Willow ran out of the hotel, she saw me getting into a car. She screamed in anguish, "George, you promised to marry me. Why are you breaking your word?" The only answer she received was the dust kicked up by the car speeding away. She kicked off her high heels and grabbed the hem of her dress as she chased after me. She shouted, "George, I love you. Come back to me." Outside the hotel, the main city road was congested with traffic. The car I was in had excellent soundproofing, so I didn't hear Willow's cries or see her chasing me. I hadn't slept well the night before. As soon as I got in the car, I buckled my seatbelt and closed my eyes. Resting in the rearview mirror, Willow came to a desperate halt at a crossroads but was struck by a car coming from the side. Blood spilled everywhere. Chapter 8. Makoto, who had caught up, saw this scene and shouted anxiously, "Willow!" Soon, Willow was rushed to the hospital. Her pure white wedding dress had been stained a vivid red. Outside the emergency room, Makoto anxiously said, "Doctor, please, you have to save her." The doctor politely replied, "We will do everything we can." As the lights in the operating room went out, The doctor emerged, drenched in sweat. Makoto, who had been waiting by the door, immediately asked, "Doctor, how is she?" The doctor removed his mask and said truthfully, "The patient is temporarily out of danger, but she suffered a severe blow to the head. We can't rule out the possibility of a concussion." Upon hearing this, Makoto breathed a sigh of relief. He said, "As long as she's fine." After Willow was transferred to a regular hospital room, Makoto followed the nurse to handle the payment. Willow, lying on the pristine white bed, felt as though she had just woken up from a long, long dream. In the dream, she lived in a place filled with many children. She had always been cute, and other children liked her, fighting to play with her, except for one. He was 3 years older than her. With a cheeky face, using his age as an advantage, he forced other kids not to play with Willow. It seemed that his daily amusement was bullying Willow. During meals, he would steal the chicken drumstick from her bowl. When walking, he would tug at her hair and even snatch the snacks the director gave her. This continued until Makoto grew up and entered society, when things gradually improved. But the good times didn't last long. Willow had spent 3 peaceful years, and at 18, it was time for her to step into society. That day, as she was about to take a taxi for an interview, she was suddenly stopped by Makoto. He stroked his chin and leered at her. "Little Willow, didn't expect you to be 18 so soon. You look even prettier now. It's worth waiting outside for you for 3 years. As he spoke, he began to make inappropriate advances toward Willow. Realizing something was wrong, Willow immediately turned and ran. Makoto chased her relentlessly. As Willow glanced back in fear, she was struck by a car coming from the opposite direction. When she woke up in the hospital, she had forgotten everything from the past. She didn't know who she was, nor where she came from. It was a fellow patient in her ward, a caring brother, who stayed by her side while she recovered. He helped her find her name and background. It turned out she was an orphan, with no family to love or care for her. I felt sorry for her and arranged a job for her, a light one. Over time, as we spent more time together, I began to aggressively pursue her, and gradually, Willow developed feelings for me. She agreed to my pursuit, and we became a couple. We dated for 5 years, and by then, my career had made progress. Before I left on a business trip, I proposed to her verbally. Willow happily agreed, but 2 days after I left, a familiar face appeared at the door. Makoto, somehow having gotten her address, saw her and immediately called out her name, hugging her joyfully. He told Willow that they had grown up together in the orphanage. They had been deeply in love and even lived together in a rented apartment. But one day, Willow suddenly disappeared, and he couldn't find her. He thought she had abandoned him. He searched for Willow for 5 years. Willow didn't believe him at first, but when the orphanage and the name matched, she had no choice but to believe him. However, she already had a boyfriend, so she tried to convince him to break up, but Makoto wouldn't give up. He said that unless Willow agreed to be with him one more time, he would keep pestering her. He also threatened to send videos from their past to George if she didn't comply. He threatened her while forcing himself on her. In the end, to prevent George from learning about this past, she reluctantly gave in. However, after a few days, Makoto still showed no signs of leaving. He said, "Unless you show me that George loves you more than I do, I won't let go." Willow, eager to cut ties with him, immediately agreed. Later, to prove my love for her, Willow repeatedly provoked me. She was certain that I would never give up on her, but things didn't go as expected. At the wedding, I left. Willow, in an attempt to get me back, got into an accident. As Willow reflected on everything, she covered her mouth and cried. She hated Makoto. She hated him for not only causing her memory loss, but also for making her lose her true love and ruining the happiness she was about to receive. When Makoto returned after paying, he was still holding a box of millet porridge. He looked at Willow, smiling as he said, "Willow, it's not that I don't want to give you the best. The doctor specifically told me that you need to eat porridge these next few days." He set up the small table, opened the box, and scooped a spoonful of porridge, blowing on it to cool it down. Once it was warm, Makoto brought the porridge to Willow's lips. Chapter 9. Willow looked at her enemy, her eyes welling with tears, but she stubbornly refused to let them fall. Makoto asked, "What's wrong?" Seeing Willow's tears, Makoto raised his hand to wipe the tears from the corner of her eyes. He said, "Are you still sad about George leaving? I've already told you. He never loved you as much as you thought." Willow's eyes, like 2 pools of water, stared fixedly at Makoto. She turned her head to avoid his touch and coldly spoke, "I remember now. I remember everything." At these words, Makoto's hand holding the porridge shook involuntarily. His expression cracked suddenly, and his words became stammered. He said, You already know." Without Willow answering, her cold expression made it clear she had remembered everything, including how he used to bully her and how he had deceived her later on. However, his panic was brief, and Makoto quickly regained his composure. He let out a light laugh and said, "Since that's the case, I don't need to pretend anymore. Anyway, you're already mine now. You have no choice but to marry me." Upon hearing this, Willow could no longer suppress the anger within her. She raised her hand, wanting to slap Makoto, but he gripped her wrist tightly. Makoto raised an eyebrow, mocking her. "Willow, can't you see the situation? George doesn't want you anymore. You're mine now." The certainty in his eyes was like a thorn, digging into Willow's heart, constantly reminding her it was she who had pushed away the person she loved the most. Tears streamed down Willow's face as she cried out in anguish. "No, I love him. I only love him." Her loud cries attracted a few onlookers peeking through the door. Makoto glared at them and growled, "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen an argument before?" Meanwhile, I had already landed and arrived on the other side of the Atlantic. At the new company, everything was going smoothly, except for the woman I encountered on my way home who tried to scam me. Her name was Anna, and she was from my hometown. They say, old friends meet, tears in their eyes, but my encounter with Anna was more of a comedy than a reunion. One day, I was driving as usual when a woman with a bun suddenly darted out from the roadside. Thankfully, I reacted quickly and wasn't driving too fast, so I managed to stop the car in time. Anna was frozen in place, dazed and unable to recover for a while. Not far away, two men in black suits were shouting at Anna, "Quick, chase her, she's over there." Upon hearing this, Anna immediately snapped out of her daze. I had opened the car door to check on her injuries, but unexpectedly, Anna, like a rabbit, quickly jumped into the passenger seat, shouting, "Get in, drive, quickly." I glanced at the two black-suited men getting closer, and without hesitation, I got back in the car and sped off. Anna looked at the men in the rearview mirror, who were now far behind, and began laughing uncontrollably in the passenger seat. She gave me a thumbs up and praised me. "Nice job." I chuckled softly and casually asked, "Where do you live? I'll take you home." There was silence in the passenger seat for a while. I turned to look at her and saw her pouting, looking at me with a pitiful expression. She said, "Are you just going to hit me and then not take responsibility? My leg still hurts, and you're going to just drop me off at home?" Anna blinked, forcing out a couple of tears. Hearing this, I was at a loss for words, torn between laughing and crying. I chuckled and asked in confusion, "Did I hit you?" Upon hearing this, Anna nodded eagerly. "Yeah, my knee still hurts." She held her right knee and looked at me with teary eyes. I furrowed my brows. I clearly remembered that I hadn't hit her. After I had stopped the car, Anna had been standing. The injury couldn't have been caused by me. She must have slipped while dodging those two black-suited men. However, I didn't call her out on it. Instead, I just smiled at her. Seeing that I didn't question her, Anna continued, "You hit me, so now you have to take responsibility for my life. Now take me to your house. I'm hungry. I want sweet and sour pork. Make it for me." She crossed her arms and said matter-of-factly. I nodded and silently changed direction. I said, "Okay." Seeing me change course, Anna quickly tightened her seatbelt, eyeing me with caution. She asked, "What are you planning to do? You're not going to sell me, are you?" Upon hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. A mischievous thought crossed my mind, and I said, "Isn't it a bit late for you to be scared?" At these words, Anna's eyes widened, and she pressed her hands to her chest, shouting loudly, "Are you going to rob me of my money or my body?" Chapter 10. Seeing that Anna was genuinely scared, I couldn't help but laugh. I said, all right, I won't tease you anymore. You wanted ribs, right? I'm going to the supermarket to buy some for you." I guessed that Anna was probably a young lady from a wealthy family who wasn't happy with her family's arrangements, so she ran away on her own. The two men in black earlier were probably her bodyguards. They didn't want to harm her, they just wanted to take her back. Upon hearing this, Anna shyly smiled, her eyes turning into crescent moons. She said, "Hee hee, sorry, I misunderstood." I smiled casually and said, "It's fine. I hope Miss Young Lady won't mind visiting my humble abode." At these words, Anna's heart skipped a beat, and she nervously swallowed. She asked, "You know already?" Anna was puzzled. She was wearing very ordinary clothes, and there was no distinguishing mark on her face. How did I know? I didn't answer her. Instead, I pulled over to the side of the road. I unbuckled my seatbelt, got out of the car, and went to the supermarket to buy ribs and other ingredients. When I came out, Anna was leaning on the car window, bored, tapping on the glass. As soon as she saw me, she straightened up and waited for me to get in the car. Once I was back in the car, Anna couldn't wait to ask, "You're really interesting. You just accept everything I say without arguing, or do you often lead other clueless girls into your traps?" I was amused by her words and gestured with my hand, inviting her to speak. "If you're worried, you can get out now. It's still not too late." Upon hearing that I was about to kick her out, Anna immediately grabbed her seatbelt and shook her head violently. She said, "No, I don't want to leave. I was just joking. I know you." Now it was my turn to be confused. I squinted at Anna, thinking for a while, but I couldn't recall where I had met her. Anna saw this, smiled, and said, "Drive on. When we get home, I'll tell you." Since she had already said this much, I didn't ask any further. In no time, we arrived at my place. As soon as we walked in, Anna made herself at home, sitting on the couch, turning on the TV and laughing aloud at the funniest scenes. I shook my head with a smile and headed to the kitchen to start cooking. Half an hour later, I brought out a plate of beautifully cooked sweet and sour ribs. As soon as Anna smelled the aroma, she jumped up from the couch. She said, "It smells so good. I'm not dieting today. I'm going to have 2 bowls of rice." I looked at Anna. Her figure was well proportioned. Neither too fat nor too thin. Just perfect. She didn't need to diet at all. I thought this to myself and said it out loud. Anna heard this and laughed. She said, "Thank you. If I ate your cooking every day, I'd definitely never lose weight." From this, I gathered that she probably planned to stay long term. But since we were alone together in one room, it wasn't great for Anna's reputation. I tried to persuade her to leave after dinner. However, this struck a nerve with Anna. She put down her bowl, still chewing the food in her mouth, and immediately said, "I'm not going. Brother George, you want to kick me out? You're so heartless." Hearing this, I frowned and asked, "Brother, I don't remember having a sister." Seeing that I had completely forgotten her, Anna stared at me with a resentful gaze that made me uneasy. She said, "When we were little, you even spanked me. Don't you remember?" At this, everything clicked in my mind. I remembered it all in an instant. It turned out that Anna and I had a past connection. Our fathers had been good friends for years, and when the adults were having tea and chatting, we would be playing nearby. Anna had been mischievous as a child, always causing trouble at home. She once ruined a model airplane I had spent 3 months putting together. At the time, Anna didn't care and casually said, "Don't worry, I'll buy you another one." Furious, I had pushed her against the wall and spanked her, saying while doing so, "Do you know what you did wrong?" Later, her crying had drawn the attention of the adults, and I didn't escape a beating either. Even now, years later, thinking about it, my bottom still aches. Seeing my expression, Anna playfully punched my arm and laughed. After she had enough of laughing, she pointed to her face and said, "Surprised? Huh? I turned out so pretty when I grew up. Are you regretting spanking me now?" While cleaning up the dishes, I teased, "I do regret it. Regret not spanking the important parts." Anna hadn't expected George to be so unconventional, completely different from her usual suitors. She quickly stepped forward to help with the dishes. She said, I'll do it. You cooked, so I'll wash the dishes. That's the rule of freeloading." Chapter 11. I couldn't help but laugh as I watched Anna, who had completely taken over the couch, pushing me to one side. She was just like when we were kids, big, carefree, and totally without any ill intentions. Even if she had some schemes, they were written all over her face, like a naive beauty. Anna stayed at my place, and while I went to work during the day, she slept in until noon, waking up whenever she felt like it. When she was hungry, she'd raid the fridge. In the afternoon, right before I got off work, she would message me her food order. After work, I'd go buy the ingredients and come back to cook for her. Our life together felt like a young couple in love. Anna's father knew she was at my place, so he finally stopped worrying and pulled back the bodyguards who had been tracking her. He figured it was better for her to stay with me, someone he knew well, rather than out there with some unknown guy. After all, we were essentially just brother and sister, so there was no reason to worry about anything inappropriate happening. Anna had been staying with me for half a month when her father finally couldn't wait any longer and called me. He sighed and pleaded, "George, my daughter has always been mischievous. She ran away because she didn't want to meet the matchmakers I arranged for her. I'm sorry for the trouble she's caused you these past few days, but she's old enough now. She can't just stay single forever, can she? Her mother and I can't take care of her forever." I understood his concern and immediately assured him, "Don't worry, Uncle. I'll talk to her and help her sort things out." But Anna was determined to stay at my place. No matter how much I tried to persuade her, no matter how much I pleaded, she refused to leave. In fact, she even wanted to take charge of the house. Every time I came home, I would find Anna showing off various sexy nightwear, but I deliberately kept my eyes straight ahead, which made Anna groan in frustration. She draped her arm over my shoulder and couldn't help but ask, "Do you have some kind of illness? Otherwise, how can you resist me, a big beauty like me?" I raised an eyebrow, gently grabbed Anna's arm, and pushed her up against the wall in a playful manner. Anna's eyes widened in shock as she forgot to breathe, and it seemed like the only sound in the world was the rapid beating of her heart. Her shy expression was imprinted in my mind. I lowered my voice and spoke. "Now, do you still want me to fall for you?" The consequences won't be something you can handle. As soon as I finished speaking, Anna's lips pressed against mine. In that moment, my heart skipped a beat. I had originally just wanted to tease her, but I never expected Anna to be serious, worried she might regret it later. I reached out to push her away, but Anna held onto my hand tightly, her eyes hazy as she looked at me. She said, "I like you. I've liked you for a long time. Let's be together, okay?" After saying that, she leaned in again, closer this time. I was a normal man, and after being teased every day, now with her soft and warm body in my arms, I couldn't hold back any longer. Meanwhile, back in China, Makoto's true nature was exposed, and he no longer pretended to be the affectionate guy. He brought Willow back with him, locking her up at his house, not allowing her to go out or contact anyone. Willow's eyes were swollen from crying, and she asked him with red eyes, "Why? What do you get out of this?" After driving George away, now he had locked her up. Willow really couldn't understand his motives. Makoto lit a cigarette and started smoking, blowing out smoke rings as he raised an eyebrow and looked at Willow. "Why? Don't you see how I feel about you? Why do you only like that man? What does he have that I don't?" At these words, Willow furrowed her brows in confusion. From her memory, Makoto had only ever bullied her, and later on, he developed some inappropriate feelings, just wanting to take advantage of her. What kind of love was that? Makoto reached out to touch Willow's face, and the moist sensation on his fingers was from her tears. His expression turned violent as he angrily pressed the cigarette butt into Willow's shoulder, causing her to cry out in pain. Seeing her suffering, Makoto suddenly smiled, grabbing her chin in a possessive way as he spoke almost obsessively. "Willow, you're mine, and only mine. As far as I know, before George left, he left you a sum of money, right? If you're smart, you'll give me all of it." Makoto was always like this. He wanted the person and the money. Willow glared at him, her chest tight with the pain, but she didn't make a sound. She had already betrayed George, and now, all she could do was protect the money he left behind. That was the only thing that gave her a sense of peace. Seeing that Willow refused to speak, Makoto snorted coldly and threw her aside. He smirked and said, "Stubborn, huh? You like George that much, huh? Fine, stay here and starve." With that, Makoto stormed out of the door. Chapter 12. After confirming that Makoto had really left, Willow finally got up from the floor. Having been trapped for half a month, she had been thinking of ways to escape every day, but Makoto kept such a close watch on her that she never had a chance. Now, with all the plans she had rehearsed in her mind, she was finally able to put them into action. Willow hurried to George's bedroom, ripped the bed sheets into strips. Only George's room had a window, so she could tie the strips into a rope and lower them down to climb out. The height of 4 stories was something she could handle, but as she tore the sheets, a piece of paper fell to the ground. Her sharp eyes caught sight of my signature, and she hurried over to pick it up. The note read, "To my beloved Willow." Willow's tears could no longer be held back. They poured out like a burst dam, flooding down her face. She covered her mouth, trying to keep herself from making any sound. The further she read, the more her heart ached. George had written, "Willow, by the time you read this letter, I will have already left. The 5 years we spent together were the happiest of my life, and I love you deeply. I also know that your feelings for me are real, but before you lost your memory, you already had someone else you loved. When faced with 2 great loves, it's hard to choose. Sometimes the person in the situation is blind to the truth, while the outsider sees it clearly. I can feel it, Willow. Since Makoto came into the picture, your love for him has become more evident, so I've chosen to step back and let you be with him." Willow's tears fell heavily onto the letter, blurring George's name. She desperately tried to wipe them away, but the more she rubbed, the darker the ink became. Finally, she folded the letter and stuffed it into her bag. The most urgent thing now was to escape. Willow grabbed her bank card, climbed down the sheets, and found the nearest police station. Makoto was arrested for breaking into a private residence and illegal detention, and he was detained for 15 days. During this time, Willow sold the house and transferred all the money into her account. After that, she went to the company where George used to work. Willow had always entered and exited the company together with him, and they were the envy of many employees. The air in the building seemed to be filled with the sweet memories of their time together. The receptionist at the front desk greeted Willow enthusiastically when she saw her. "Miss Liu, did you come to the company to pick up something that Mr. Wang left behind?" Willow shook her head and asked directly. "Is George not in the office?" The receptionist looked at Willow with a puzzled expression and said, "Mr. Wang left for overseas half a month ago. As his lover, didn't you know?" Willow got the answer and quickly came up with a reason to cover it up. She said, "Well, he only told me he was on a business trip. Our 5th anniversary is coming up, and I want to surprise him. Could you tell me the address of the overseas office?" The receptionist, a kind-hearted girl, immediately tore off a note and wrote down the company address abroad. 2 days later, I was at the office discussing business. The receptionist came up to me and whispered, "Mr. Wong, there's someone looking for you outside." I thought it was Anna looking for me, so I excused myself from my business partner and followed the receptionist. But when I walked into the break room, I saw someone I never expected to see again in my life. Willow slowly stood up, forcing a smile onto her face. She raised her hand and greeted me. It's been a long time. Upon seeing Willow, my legs felt like they were made of lead, and I couldn't move. After a long pause, I replied indifferently. It's been a long time. Willow, struggling to hide the pain in her heart, forced a smile at me. She said, "Give me some time. Can we talk?" Her eyes were shining with hope. I thought for a moment and finally nodded. I knew Willow well. If she had something on her mind and didn't talk it out, she wouldn't be at peace for the rest of her life. After agreeing, I immediately sent a message to Anna. I wrote, "I'm meeting an old friend tonight, so I won't be able to cook for you. You'll have to fend for yourself." Anna first sent a sad emoji, followed by a voice message. "Then I'm punishing you to bring me some small cakes when you come back." I smiled and replied, "Okay." At the cafe, Willow finally couldn't hold it in any longer and burst into loud sobs. People around us turned to look, their stares uncomfortable. I felt uneasy under the attention and spoke in a low voice. "Miss Liu, if you keep crying like this, people might think I'm bullying you." Hearing this, Willow slowly stopped crying, wiping away her tears and apologizing. "I'm sorry, it's just that I've been through so much recently." Chapter 13. Since I went abroad, I had stopped paying attention to things back home. To me, it seemed that Willow should be living happily with Makoto now. Willow quietly gazed at me, as if she wanted to memorize every pore on my body. I asked, "You've lost weight. Have you been very tired recently?" At my words, Willow couldn't hold back her tears any longer. She cried silently, choking as she said, "George, my memory has come back." Hearing this, my fingers trembled. I averted my gaze and said, "So, are you here to thank me for making the right choice for you?" Willow cried until her eyes were red. She shook her head violently. No, that's not it," she quickly explained. "We were both deceived by Makoto. Willow told me everything that had happened. After hearing the truth, I was shocked. I never imagined that Makoto had played us both like fools." Willow cried as she grabbed my hand, sobbing. "George, I saw the letter you left for me. I know you still care about me, and I've always only had you in my heart. Can we get back together, please?" At that moment, my heart was a whirlpool of emotions. I had truly been hurt before, but after hearing Makoto's words, I had let go. Now, I had my new life, and I had Anna. I was planning to visit my father-in-law with Anna in a few days, but now, Willow had shown up. Saying all these things, I pulled my hand back and leaned against the back of the chair. I looked at Willow seriously and decisively said, "It's impossible between us. Miss Liu, the past is over. Let it stay in the past. Don't keep dwelling on it. And I already have a girlfriend now. We can't go back." When Willow heard this, her pupils dilated in shock. She cried and shook her head, shouting, "It's impossible. Absolutely impossible. You loved me so much. How could you fall in love with someone else so quickly? You must be making excuses to push me away, right?" Her watery eyes locked onto mine, waiting for me to confirm her thoughts. But the reality didn't match her expectations. I shook my head coldly and distanced myself. "Miss Liu, if you don't have anything else to say, let's end it here. I have things to deal with at home, so I'm leaving now." After saying this, I turned and walked out. When I returned home, I was surprised to see a few dishes on the table, my favorites: braised ribs, cola chicken wings, and meatballs. Before I could react, Anna walked out of the kitchen holding 2 bowls of rice. She smiled, her eyes squinted, and sweetly said, "How's it going? Am I a good cook? Having a girlfriend like me, you must be secretly enjoying it." All these dishes were ones Anna had learned to make by watching me. Normally, I did all the cooking, so she didn't get a chance to show off. But today, since I was busy, she got the opportunity to shine. Looking at Anna's joyful expression, as if she had won a victory, I was infected by her happiness and laughed. She said, "Why are you still standing there? Go wash your hands and eat." Hearing Anna, I snapped back to reality. I quickly washed my hands and eagerly sat down to eat. I complimented her. "I didn't expect you to have such talent." I devoured my food, enjoying it thoroughly. Anna watched me and smiled contentedly. At that moment, there was a polite knock on the door. 3 gentle knocks echoed. Anna, puzzled, asked, "Who's at the door? Could it be someone from your company?" "No way. You're so busy today. It's been so long since work ended, and now someone's coming to find you at home." I was also curious, so I put down my chopsticks and went to open the door. When I opened the door, I saw a familiar face. My smile froze instantly. Willow chuckled and said, "George, don't you want to invite me in for a seat?" Seeing that I had opened the door but didn't invite her in, Anna bounced over. She casually put her arm around my shoulder and smiled. "What are you standing there for? Come in and sit." When Anna appeared in front of Willow, Willow finally understood that I hadn't been lying to her. Everything I had said was true. It made sense. I never lied to her. I never even told a white lie. But even with my sincere honesty, she had lost me. Willow looked into my eyes, and they became tear-filled. She said, "George, I have something I want to talk to her about. Could you give us a moment?" Hearing this, Anna pointed at herself in confusion and asked, "Me, but we don't even know each other." I felt a little awkward. I was afraid Willow might take advantage of Anna. Willow could see my concerns and gave a helpless, bitter smile. Chapter 14. She never imagined that this meticulous love would one day fall into someone else's hands. She said, "Don't worry, I won't do anything to her. Besides, this is your home. What are you afraid of?" Willow's words completely dispelled the doubts in my mind. After getting Anna's consent, I entered the room, leaving the living room space for them. Once they were seated, Willow stared at Anna intently, as if she were looking through her to someone else. Anna, confused, touched her face and asked, "Is there something on my face?" Willow smiled and replied, "No, you're very beautiful. George is lucky to have found such a wonderful girlfriend like you." Hearing the compliment, Anna laughed happily. Willow continued to gaze at her, and through Anna's innocent smile, Willow seemed to see the version of herself from years ago, the one who had first met me. After a moment, Willow took a bank card from her pocket and placed it in front of Anna. She explained, "I'm going back to my country. I may not be able to attend your wedding. This card has a little money on it. Consider it my wedding gift to you. I hope you won't reject it." After saying this, she stood up and left. No matter how much Anna called after her, she didn't stop. The moment Willow saw that I had moved on and found someone new, it was as if her heart was being scorched by hot coals. Even if she was reluctant to let go, she couldn't change the fact George had found someone better than her, and there was no reason to ruin that. All she could do was offer her blessings. After Willow left, I came out from the room. Seeing me, Anna immediately pointed at the bank card on the table and said with a laugh, "Your friend is really something. Not only does she give a wedding gift in advance, but it's a bank card." I followed her gaze and saw the familiar bank card on the table. My eyes narrowed slightly. I looked in the direction Willow had left and exhaled deeply. That night, I told Anna everything about my past relationship. At first, Anna couldn't believe it. After all, amnesia was something that usually only happened in TV dramas, and she had happened to be in 2 car accidents and survived both. But after thinking it over, Anna sighed. "It's just fate, Miss Lou, and you have a deep connection, but no destiny." I turned to her, smiled slightly, and softly said, "Don't worry, when I loved you, my heart was completely yours." Hearing my promise, Anna smiled sweetly, hugged me, and gave me a light kiss on the cheek. After leaving my house, Willow didn't immediately return to her country. Even though she had said she would let go, she still couldn't bear to leave me. She wanted to see me, to watch me find happiness, to watch me be happy every day. Although it was morally wrong to spy on someone else's happiness, Willow couldn't control her inner longing, until Makoto came looking for her. Seeing Makoto's face again, Willow felt a shiver run through her body. She was afraid of what Makoto might do. Seeing Willow in this state, Makoto grinned and stepped closer to her. He said, "What's the matter? Hasn't it been just a few days? Don't you recognize me anymore? We were so close back then." Saying this, Makoto raised his hand to lift Willow's chin. A nostalgic look on his face, Willow nearly collapsed. The painful memories of the past surged in her mind like a flood. She cried, pleading, "Please, I beg you, leave me alone. You've already destroyed me. What else do you want?" Looking at Willow, now a mess of tears, Makoto furrowed his brows and feigned sympathy. "Willow, why are you crying? I love you so much. You should be happy." Suddenly, he slapped his forehead as if having an epiphany and said, "Are you still thinking about George? If you can't forget him, do you believe I won't send our intimate video to him? If he sees how sweet we were, he'll surely support us." After saying this, he reached out, trying to wipe the tears from Willow's eyes, but she turned her head away. She spat at him and whispered, "Ugh, you're the scum of society, a complete lunatic." Mentioning George, Willow could no longer hold back. She could tolerate how Makoto had treated her, but if he tried to involve George, she would make sure to fight him to the bitter end. Makoto raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. He hadn't expected the usually submissive little rabbit to fight back. He laughed. "Oh, still protecting him? Do you think that if he doesn't know about the video, he'll change his mind? He's already fallen for someone else, hasn't he?" With every word Makoto spoke, Willow's heart shattered further. She didn't know where her courage came from, but she grabbed Makoto's collar and shouted, "What right do you have to say that? You're the root of all this." If you made sure I couldn't have happiness, then I won't let you have it either. With that, Willow grabbed both his shoulders and shoved him into the corner of the wall, choking him. Chapter 15. Makoto's eyes flashed with disbelief as he saw murderous intent in Willow's gaze. But the strength between men and women has always been unequal. By the time Makoto reacted, he casually flicked his hand and shoved Willow aside. He patted his clothes and straightened his collar, sneering at her, a woman who eats from both sides. I've been so good to you, yet you're still thinking about that man. Is it just because he's richer than me? Just you wait. One day, I'll be wealthier than him. Then, you'll be mine. From the look in Makoto's eyes, Willow sensed something was off. She squinted, asking, "What do you want?" Makoto didn't answer her, only smiled mysteriously before taking Willow away. Just like before, he imprisoned her once again. Willow was bound and thrown onto the bed. She looked at Makoto in terror and shouted, "You're crazy. I'd rather die than like you. The only person I love is George." She couldn't understand, how could someone who had bullied her as a child now, as an adult, become obsessed with wanting her? Learning from his previous mistake, Makoto purposely chose a room with no windows this time, except when Willow needed to use the bathroom. Makoto kept her hands bound, never leaving her side. Even when she ate, he personally fed her. He said, "Willow, just wait and see. George may be shining brightly now, but in half a month, he'll be a complete mess." Looking at the sinister smile on Makoto's face, Willow furrowed her brows, a sense of foreboding rising in her heart. She asked, "What are you going to do? I warn you, don't harm George." In response, all she got was Makoto's playful smile. Half a month later, after finishing up some business at the company, I took Anna to visit her parents. I had someone specially buy a box of Anna's father's favorite liquor and some bird's nest for her mother, as a gift. As soon as we entered, I greeted them warmly. "Mr. and Mrs., I've come to see you." They were delighted to see me and waved, urging me inside. "George, come in. What a rare guest. The last time we saw each other was, 10 years ago?" I nodded awkwardly and said, "Mr. and Mrs., I just got transferred abroad recently. The company's been busy, so I didn't get the chance to visit sooner. It's my fault." Hearing my apology, they waved their hands dismissively. "No problem. Young people are busy. It's good. Look at you, coming all this way with such expensive gifts." Soon, however, their smiles faded as they noticed something off. Their gazes landed on the hands Anna and I were tightly holding. The most reactive was Anna's father. He screamed, "What's going on with you two?" Anna raised our hands, intertwined, and smiled. "As you can see, we're in love." Seeing the proud look on his daughter's face, Anna's father felt heartbroken. He had thought that placing his daughter with me would be the safest choice, but now he realized that the safest place had turned into the most dangerous one. At this moment, he regretted it deeply, but seeing the affection between us now, he knew it was already too late to change anything. I lightly coughed and placed my right hand over my mouth as if to cover it. I said, "Mr. and Mrs., please rest assured, I will take good care of Anna from now on." Hearing this, Anna's father and mother exchanged a look. Anna's mother was the first to accept the situation, thinking that I was a solid, driven person, and being her son-in-law wouldn't be bad. However, Anna's father still felt blocked in his chest. His precious daughter, whom he had raised carefully, had rejected the wealthy oil tycoon and diamond prince he had picked for her, choosing instead someone like me, an ordinary man worth only a few million. Just as he was about to voice his disagreement, he saw his daughter's joyful smile, and the words he was about to say got stuck in his throat. Seeing this, Anna grabbed her father's hand and coquettishly said, "My dearest daddy, I know that the reason you pushed me to arrange blind dates before was because you wanted what was best for me and my happiness. But my happiness is George. Please accept him." After being bombarded with sugar-coated words, Anna's father sighed helplessly and nodded in resignation. After the meal, Anna and I were preparing to leave. Just then, my phone rang. "Mr. Wong, something's wrong at the company." Chapter 16. After answering the phone, my face darkened. Anna, concerned, asked, "George, what's wrong? You look terrible." Hearing Anna's words, I forced a smile. I patted her head and reassured her. "It's nothing. There's just some business at the company I need to handle." After sending Anna home, I rushed to the company without delay. As soon as I entered the office, I saw Makoto sitting in a chair. His hands were casually folded on the desk, and he looked lazy yet dangerous. He said, "Long time no see." I shoved my hands in my pockets, giving him a cold stare as I asked sharply, "Don't tell me you came to my company just to catch up." Makoto smirked at my words. "Of course not. I came here to make a bet with you. If I win, you give me your entire fortune. If I lose, I'll give you 1 billion. How about it?" I furrowed my brow. How did I not know that Makoto could come up with 1 billion? Even if he had that kind of capital, I had no reason to bet with him. With that thought, I immediately declined. Makoto seemed to have expected this and upped the stakes. Willow is in my hands. If you don't accept the bet, I'll kill her. Upon hearing this, even my patience was stretched to the limit, and I couldn't help but rush at him. I demanded, "You said you loved her. Is this your so-called love?" Makoto's mouth bled from the punch, but instead of being angry, he just laughed. Ha ha ha. Who's the one in her heart? It's always you. It was easier to deceive her when she had amnesia, but now that her memory's back, she refuses to be with me. If that's the case, maybe it's better to just let her die. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked in confusion, "What do you want to bet on?" He replied, "Let's bet on next week's bidding competition. If you lose to the other company, then you lose. Otherwise, I lose. How about it?" With blood still on his lips, Makoto smiled with a sinister look that sent a chill down my spine. I stared at him intently, trying to read something from his face. In the next moment, I simply agreed. Fine. I was confident I could win against the other company in the bidding competition next week. My entire fortune was just a few million, so of course, I could win. But, despite this, seeing the look of certainty on Makoto's face made me feel uneasy. When I got home that evening, I was distracted, forgetting to even change my shoes when I entered the house. Anna gently patted my head, and after confirming I wasn't running a fever, she quietly asked, "Did something happen at the company?" I sighed and pulled her into my arms, telling her about everything that had happened at the company today. After listening, Anna furrowed her brows in confusion. She asked, "The other company is full of industry insiders, so anyone could tell that they have no competitive edge. Why is Makoto betting on them to win?" We discussed it for a while but couldn't come to any conclusions. At that moment, about an hour after work had ended, the secretary, who should have already left, sneaked back into the office. She quietly opened the password-protected safe where I had locked the bidding documents, copied a set of files, and then carefully returned them to the safe. After doing this, she took the documents and went to see Makoto. She said, "I've done what you asked. Now, can you let my family go?" Makoto smiled as he took the documents, checking them carefully. After confirming their authenticity, he spoke. "What's the rush? Don't worry. After tomorrow's bidding victory, I'll make sure your brother appears before you, whole and unharmed." Having received this promise, the secretary left, reassured. The morning of the bidding competition, before leaving, I checked the bidding documents again. Seeing that the hair strands on the documents were still in place, I felt a sense of relief as I went to the competition. But to my surprise, the other company's documents were identical to mine. As expected, I lost the bid and was kicked out of the competition venue. As I exited, I saw Makoto leaning casually against the wall, looking at me with a smug expression. He said, "You lost. Now it's time to fulfill your promise." With that, Makoto pulled out a transfer agreement and pointed to the place where I was supposed to sign. "Just sign here." I took the agreement, my hands trembling uncontrollably. He continued, "I've waited a long time for this moment. I want to prove that I'm stronger than you. I am the one Willow should love. You lost, George. From today on, you're worthless." I nodded in grim resignation and took the pen from his hand. Just as I was about to sign, I snapped the pen in half. I asked, "Why should I sign?" Makoto was speechless, stuttering. "We agreed on this, didn't we?" I sighed and replied, "No, you misunderstood. It was just a joke. Why are you taking it so seriously? Why are you blowing it out of proportion?" Makoto's face turned red with anger, and he charged at me, ready to strike. Chapter 17. At that moment, Willow suddenly appeared from somewhere. She shoved Makoto aside and grabbed the agreement from my hand, tearing it to shreds. She shouted, "Makoto, you're insane. I have all the evidence of your crimes. I've already called the police, and they'll be here soon." Makoto's eyes widened in shock when he saw Willow. "How could you have escaped?" He had tied Willow up, and there were no sharp objects in the room. How had she managed to escape? Willow ran her hand through her messy hair, sneering as she spoke. "It shouldn't have been possible, but you made a mistake by kidnapping the wrong person." Makoto had kidnapped her brother to force her to help him, using his life to threaten her. But he didn't realize that the man wasn't just any ordinary person, he was a retired soldier. He easily untied himself and was about to leave, but then he found another woman tied up in the next room. So, he rescued Willow as well. After that, he went to the police, and knowing that Makoto would harm me, Willow immediately came to my rescue. She glanced at me, relieved to have made it in time. In the past, I was always the one protecting her, clearing the obstacles for her. This time, it was her turn to shield me from the storm. Makoto, realizing that it was his own mistake that allowed Willow to escape, was filled with regret. But soon, he seemed to shrug it off. He gritted his teeth and said, "It's fine that you escaped. Now, let's see how George loses to me. Willow, I am the one you should love." He grabbed Willow's hand and placed it on his chest, urging her to feel his heartbeat. Willow, disgusted, pulled her hand away and stepped in front of me. "Crazy, You can still turn yourself in. Once the police arrive, you won't be able to escape. The accounts in both the domestic and foreign markets, they need to be settled together. And your bribery of the secretary to steal business secrets, that'll get you a long sentence. At her words, Makoto raised both his hands. Clutching his head, he laughed manically. Ha ha ha. So, you're really going to oppose me like this? His question was left unanswered by Willow. The sound of police sirens in the distance told him that there was no turning back. After handing over all the evidence to the police, Makoto was arrested and taken away. He didn't resist, didn't deny it, and didn't make any extreme moves. Before leaving, Makoto glanced at Willow, a smile curling at the corner of his lips, but Willow didn't notice. As her full attention was on me, she reached out to touch my face, but hesitated and pulled her hand back. Taking a deep breath, she struggled to hold back the tears. She said, "This time, I finally managed to help you." Willow smiled, her eyes filled with deep affection. I turned my gaze away and looked at Anna, who had just arrived. I asked, "Anna, didn't I tell you it's nothing? Why are you here?" Anna looked at Willow and then remembered everything I had told her earlier. Her eyes dimmed slightly, and she said calmly, "I was worried about you, so I came to check on you." For a moment, the atmosphere between the three of us became tense. Willow broke the silence. Speaking first, she said, "Anna, there's something I want to talk to you about. Is it okay if we step aside for a moment?" She glanced at me, her voice trembling as she added, "Please, I need to borrow your girlfriend for a while." Fearing I might object, Willow forced a smile and jokingly said, "Don't worry, I'm not going to eat her." I opened my mouth to refuse, but before I could say anything, Anna's voice cut in. "That's fine, there's a coffee shop over there. Let's sit and talk." Anna pointed to a small pavilion nearby and walked ahead. Willow followed closely behind. As soon as they sat down, Willow spoke directly. "I can't let go of George. Can you give him back to me?" Her eyes were red, and her eyelids were swollen. Seeing Willow in such a pitiful state, Anna's heart clenched painfully. She tightly gripped her coffee cup, her lips pressed together in silence. Seeing Anna beginning to soften, Willow continued, "I believe George has already told you about me. I came here to seek his forgiveness, to rekindle our relationship, but now he's with you. I thought I could let you two be happy together, just watching him live a good life, but I realized I can't do it. Seeing you two so affectionate, my mind always drifts back to the sweet memories I shared with him. I love him. I can't live without him. I can't go on a single day without him. I beg you, please, give him back to me. I'll do anything you want." Willow grasped Anna's hand, crying out in anguish. Anna looked up, staring intently at Willow, the tearful woman before her. Chapter 18. Anna felt a little sympathy for Willow's situation, but she replied, "Feelings can't be forced. If George still likes you, I won't be able to take him away. On the other hand, if he doesn't feel the same about you, even if I step aside, he won't be with you." Anna spoke calmly, but her words deeply struck Willow. Willow swept her hand across the table, throwing her coffee onto the ground and shouted, "No, as long as you step aside, George will change his mind and get back together with me." Anna tilted her head and smiled, raising an eyebrow. "Really?" She took out her phone, dialed my number, and called me over. I was worried about Anna, so I had been waiting not far away. I could hear every word they were saying clearly. I said, "Willow, what we had is in the past. When I loved you, I had no regrets, and when we broke up, I have nothing to apologize for." Willow shook her head, shouting loudly, "I love you too, and when I loved you, I didn't wrong you. Then why can't we be together anymore?" Looking at Willow, who was crying uncontrollably, I rubbed my temples and spoke coldly. "Do you dare say you didn't wrong me?" My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for Willow to hear. Willow froze in place as the memory of her intimate moments with Makoto suddenly flashed through her mind. She lost her confidence. Willow clutched her hair in frustration, speaking painfully. "But that wasn't my intention." I sighed and continued. "It doesn't matter whether you had amnesia or what your state of mind was at the time. The fact is you betrayed me. As lovers, no matter what happens, we should be honest with each other and solve things together. Not like you, who not only betrayed me but also hurt yourself in the process." At this point, Anna stood up, placing one hand on my shoulder in approval. Willow sniffed, looking at the affection between Anna and me, realizing that we could never go back to the way things were. She wiped her tears and, supporting herself on the chair, stood up. She said, "But you were the one who spoiled me the most, right? You always forgave me whenever I did something wrong. Why is it that this time, even though I'm apologizing, even though I'm begging you, you still won't forgive me? Don't people all make mistakes? I just went down the wrong path. Can't you forgive me once more? I promise, this will be the last time. I'll be good from now on." Seeing that Willow wasn't getting through to me, I grabbed Anna's hand, interlacing our fingers, and turned to leave. I only left a few words in the air. The bidding matter. I could handle it without you. So please, stop disturbing our lives. After saying goodbye to Willow, Anna and I started discussing our wedding plans. After all, we were both around 27 or 28, and Anna's family was pressing her about it. Once we set a date, I carefully planned a proposal. On the largest cruise ship, in the middle of the deck, Anna was surrounded by everyone, wearing the most beautiful and dazzling dress. As I knelt on one knee, holding a diamond ring, one that could only be made for a man's lifetime, under the witness of the twilight, with the evening breeze and the scent of the sea, I asked loudly, "Anna, will you marry me?" Anna gasped in surprise, her happy tears flowing from the corners of her eyes. She shouted into the wind. Yes, her answer was carried by the wind to every corner of the cruise ship, and everyone around us cheered and blessed our love. On the deck, we embraced each other in happiness, while below deck, Willow stood with a wine glass in one hand, her eyes slightly wet behind her sunglasses. She deliberately shifted her gaze, clinking glasses with a handsome blonde-haired, blue-eyed man at the same table. Since we now had our own happy life, maybe it was time for her to move on and search for her own happiness. A month later, Anna and I's wedding day finally arrived. My parents had long since passed away, and I didn't have many close friends, so we decided to have the wedding abroad. In the center of the venue, Anna, dressed in a diamond-encrusted wedding gown, stood next to me in a formal suit, looking like a match made in heaven. The priest gave us his blessing, and our friends and family sent us their warmest congratulations. At that moment, Willow stood outside the venue, dragging her suitcase, walking step by step towards the airport. As our vows echoed through the ceremony, she was going back to her home country. The departure of one person is always accompanied by endless loneliness. Willow couldn't help but think, perhaps when George left, he felt the same way, full of sadness but also relief after letting go. After the plane landed, hearing the familiar sound of Mandarin around her, Willow truly felt that she was starting anew. With the remaining money she had, she rented a small apartment and found a job at a nearby supermarket, just enough to get by. Chapter 19. The person in charge of taking care of Willow had a bad temper. Whenever she made the slightest mistake, he would start yelling. Using vulgar language, he scolded. "I don't understand how a clean little girl like you can be so dumb. I've told you so many times. The pull tab on the canned drinks has to be facing down. If you can't remember this, just get lost. Stop acting like you've never worked before, so dumb and clueless." Willow silently listened, inwardly reflecting that she truly hadn't had much work experience. She had been well protected by George, like a flower in a greenhouse, never having gone through any storms. But now, her greenhouse was gone, and she had to learn how to face the storms of life on her own. She lowered her head and kept apologizing. "I'm sorry, it's my fault. I'm sorry, I won't do it again. I'm sorry, I will correct my mistake." Days passed, and Willow gradually got used to her new life, though sometimes she felt exhausted and wanted to sleep, and at times, she would retch. One day, Willow received a phone call from the police station. It was Makoto, wanting to meet with her. Hearing Makoto's voice again, Willow had already let go of the past. She replied calmly, "There's no need for us to meet anymore, is there?" On the other end of the line, Makoto chuckled lightly, and his hoarse voice came through. "Willow, I have some good news to tell you. You have to come." Curious about what the news was, Willow went to the prison to see him after work. Makoto had been sentenced to 5 years, and he had only been incarcerated for a few months. Sitting across from Makoto, who had a scruffy face, Willow took the phone and asked, "What is it? Just tell me quickly." Willow looked impatient, which irritated Makoto. He deliberately teased her. "Don't you feel something strange in your body these days?" Upon hearing this, Willow furrowed her brows. She thought back over the past days but couldn't find anything unusual. Willow glared at him and coldly replied, "If you're not going to tell me, I'm leaving." As she said this, she was about to hang up. Makoto immediately widened his eyes and anxiously shouted, Wait, I'll tell you." At his words, Willow put the phone back to her ear. Makoto chuckled and said, "You're pregnant with my child. I told you, you can only belong to me in this lifetime." Upon hearing this, Willow was struck as if by lightning, standing frozen in place, unable to respond. When she finally came to her senses, she stood up in agitation, looking into Makoto's eyes, and shouted, "What did you say? How could I be pregnant with your child?" Seeing Willow's reaction, Makoto burst out laughing. "Ha ha ha." Willow frantically slapped the glass, demanding an explanation. Finally, the prison guard had to push her back into her seat. Willow took a deep breath, calmed herself, and then asked, "Tell me, why?" After Makoto stopped laughing, he picked up the phone again and spoke in a low voice. "You were already pregnant when you had the car accident. If you calculate the dates, it's my child. That's when I decided I wanted to have you completely. As for before, I just wanted to play with you and make some money off you." Upon hearing this news, Willow's mind exploded. She hung up the phone and immediately went to the hospital for an examination. The report showed that she was 4 months pregnant. Willow couldn't believe it, gently touching her stomach, and when she recalled the earlier bouts of nausea, she had no choice but to accept it. This, without a doubt, was another huge blow to her. Willow had finally managed to forget the harm Makoto had caused her and had just begun a new life. But now, because of the child, she was tangled up with him again. She pounded on her stomach in frustration, wanting to get rid of it. Chapter 20. But when she looked up, she saw a woman pushing a baby stroller walking by. The woman was gently singing a lullaby, slowly pushing the stroller, soothing the baby to sleep. The baby in the stroller looked up at Willow, smiling and giggling at her. The woman noticed the report in Willow's hand and kindly pulled her aside, smiling as she said, "You're pregnant, aren't you? Are you a little scared?" She noticed the tears in Willow's eyes, raised her hand, and gently wiped them away. She continued, "When I was pregnant, I was scared too, just like you. I was so upset, I could cry, but now that my baby is here, looking at her makes me happy. Come over and take a look. She's so cute." Willow leaned in and took a glance. The baby seemed so full of life, staring at her with wide eyes and smiling. This changed Willow's mood. She gently touched her own belly. Inside, there was also a life as lovely as that. The grudges of the adults shouldn't involve the child. The child was innocent. She made the decision to keep the baby and give birth to him. 6 months later, Anna and I returned to our country. Anna looked at my hand holding hers as I helped her down the plane, unable to resist teasing. "Hey, I'm just pregnant, not handicapped. There's no need to treat me like a princess." I smiled indulgently, supporting Anna as she got off the plane, and said gently, "You are my princess, and besides, now that you're carrying the fruit of our love, I have to treat you even better." Anna's eyes narrowed with a smile upon hearing this. She said, "I knew I was right from the beginning. Well then, in appreciation of your attentiveness, I'll allow you the chance to take care of me." At her words, I bent down slightly and joked, "Thank you, princess, for giving me this opportunity." Since becoming pregnant, Anna had become more sentimental. She grew up in our country and wanted our baby to be born here. So I applied for a transfer at work, and we moved back. After settling in the new house, Anna looked around and then, holding her belly, playfully said to me, "George, our baby is hungry and wants some steak. Is that okay?" She winked at me, amused. I patted her head and affectionately said, "Of course, we can have steak." As we walked downstairs, Anna and I passed a supermarket. She was feeling thirsty, so we went inside to buy 2 bottles of water. Just as we grabbed the water and were heading to the checkout counter, I saw Willow, who was restocking shelves while pushing a small cart. She also had a baby on her back, sleeping soundly in a swaddle. Even the motorcycle speeding outside the supermarket didn't disturb the baby's peaceful sleep. As soon as Willow lifted her head, she saw Anna, with her large belly, and me carefully protecting her, afraid the shelves might bump into her. Willow glanced at us, then lowered her head, pushed the cart, and turned to leave. The past was behind us. Now, we were on separate paths, living our own lives. Meeting again only brought unnecessary trouble. Anna had just finished paying and was calling me to go eat steak when she noticed I had been staring at one direction for a long time. But when she looked over, there was nothing there. Anna couldn't help but ask, "What were you looking at just now?" Hearing Anna's question, I withdrew my gaze, shook my head, and replied, "It's nothing. Let's go eat steak. You and the baby must be tired. I should treat you both well." Willow and I had long been people on separate roads. Seeing each other now and pretending not to know each other was the best outcome for us, leaving behind the past in the crowd.